Silent residents are common in long-term care facilities. Stroke damage, advanced dementia, or simple withdrawal from social interaction can render patients uncommunicative despite receiving appropriate medical attention. In my 13 years, as a night nurse at Hillcrest Manor, I had cared for dozens of nonverbal residents who required extra attention to assess their needs and ensure their comfort. But the man in room 224 was different from other silent patients in ways that gradually became unsettling. He appeared to be in his 70s, with gray hair and weathered features that suggested a lifetime of outdoor work. Always alert, always watching, always following staff movements with eyes that never seemed to blink or lose focus. Unlike residents with dementia or neurological damage, the man in room 224 appeared completely aware of his surroundings. He tracked conversations, responded to environmental changes, and showed obvious interest in facility activities. But he never spoke, never acknowledged direct communication, and never displayed facial expressions that would indicate his emotional state. His chart was remarkably sparse. No admission date, no previous medical records, no emergency contact information. The name listed was J. Morrison, but no family members visited, no friends inquired about his condition, and no outside physicians had transferred his care to our facility. "How long has Mr. Morrison been a resident here?" I asked. Patricia, the day shift supervisor, she consulted her records. "I'm not sure. He's been in room 224 as long as I can remember, but I don't have a specific admission date. What's his diagnosis? What level of care does he require?" Patricia looked puzzled by the question. I'm not sure. He seems to be stable, no medications, no special care requirements. Just routine monitoring. But every resident needed some form of medical care or assistance with daily living activities. No one was admitted to Hillcrest Manor without documented medical needs that justified long-term care placement. I reviewed J. Morrison's chart more thoroughly. The file contained basic vital signs records and notation that he ate independently and required no assistance with personal care. But there were no physician orders, no treatment plans, no medication schedules. He existed in our system as a resident who required no medical intervention beyond basic monitoring. During my rounds, I always checked on Mr. Morrison last, partly because his intense stare made me uncomfortable and partly because he never seemed to require anything. He would be lying in bed, propped up slightly, watching me approach with unwavering attention. "Good evening, Mr. Morrison. How are you feeling tonight?" No response. He would continue staring with the same focused intensity that suggested complete awareness combined with absolute refusal to communicate. "Are you in any pain? Do you need anything?" The staring would continue, unblinking, following my movements as I checked his room and recorded his stable vital signs. Other staff members reported similar experiences with Mr. Morrison. He watched everyone, acknowledged no one, and required no interventions beyond routine vital sign monitoring. "He's been that way since I started working here 8 years ago," said Maria, one of our senior nurses. "Never speaks, never responds, but he's always watching. Makes me nervous." "Has he ever communicated with anyone?" "Not that I know of, but..." "He's obviously aware of everything that happens on this unit." Dr. Rahman, our medical director, was equally puzzled by Mr. Morrison's status when I asked about his treatment plan. "J. Morrison, let me check his file." But Dr. Rahman found the same sparse documentation that I had discovered. No medical history, no diagnostic information, no physician orders beyond basic monitoring. "This is highly unusual," Dr. Rahman admitted. "Every resident should have comprehensive medical records and active treatment plans. What do you think his condition is?" Based on his presentation, he appears alert and oriented, possibly selective mutism or psychological withdrawal, but without background information, it's difficult to provide appropriate care. Dr. Rahman attempted to conduct a more thorough evaluation of Mr. Morrison, but the patient's complete non-responsiveness made assessment impossible. He wouldn't answer questions, wouldn't follow simple commands, wouldn't provide any indication of his cognitive or physical status. But his eyes never left Dr. Rahman during the examination, watching every movement with obvious understanding of what was occurring. "He's aware of everything," Dr. Rahman concluded, "but he's chosen complete non-participation in his own medical care." The situation became more mysterious when I tried to research Mr. Morrison's admission to Hillcrest Manor. The administrative records showed no intake paperwork, no insurance verification, no admission process documentation. He simply existed in our resident roster without any record of how he had come to live at our facility. Maybe the admission paperwork was lost during our computer system upgrade, suggested the business manager. Older files sometimes get corrupted during data transfers, but even lost paperwork should leave some trace in insurance records or family contact files. Mr. Morrison had no external documentation of any kind. He existed solely within Hillcrest Manor's walls, requiring no outside medical consultations, no prescription medications, no family communication or discharge planning. One night during my 3 a.m. rounds, I decided to attempt more direct communication with Mr. Morrison. Instead of asking questions that required verbal responses, I tried to establish basic yes-no communication through simple gestures. Mr. Morrison, if you can understand me, please blink once. He continued, staring without blinking. If you're comfortable, don't move. If you need anything, move your right hand. No movement, no response, no acknowledgement of the communication attempt. But his eyes followed my every motion with such intensity that I felt he was memorizing details about my appearance, my mannerisms, and my professional behavior. The watching continued for months. Every night shift, every weekend rotation, Mr. Morrison would be alert and observant, tracking staff activities with eyes that never seemed to require sleep or rest. But he never pressed his call button, never showed signs of distress, never required medical intervention beyond routine vital sign monitoring. On a Tuesday morning in March, I found room 224 empty, not just unoccupied, completely vacant. The bed was made with fresh linens, but there was a clear body impression in the mattress, as if someone had been lying there for hours and had just gotten up. The sheets retained warmth and showed the outline of a person-sized form. But Mr. Morrison was nowhere in the room. I checked the bathroom, the closet, under the bed. No sign of where he might have gone. Did Mr. Morrison get transferred overnight? I asked the charge nurse. She checked her logs. No transfers scheduled. He should be in his room. But room 224 was empty, except for the warm body impression that suggested very recent occupancy. I contacted security to report a missing resident. They searched the entire facility, but found no trace of J. Morrison. No one had seen him leave his room. No security cameras had recorded his movement. No staff member remembered any change in his status, but the body impression in his bed remained distinct throughout the morning, as if he had just stepped away temporarily and would return momentarily. Administration launched a formal investigation into Mr. Morrison's disappearance, but they discovered that he had never officially existed as a resident. No admission records, no financial accounts, no legal documentation of his presence at Hillcrest Manor. According to our official records, there has never been a J. Morrison in room 224, the administrator reported. But every staff member remembers caring for him. The room remained vacant, but the body impression in the mattress persisted for weeks, gradually fading but never completely disappearing. Housekeeping would make the bed with fresh linens, but by morning the impression would return, as if someone were still sleeping there invisibly. Eventually, room 224 was assigned to a new resident, but Mrs. Peterson complained about feeling watched during the night. "There's someone in this room with me," she insisted. "I can feel eyes staring at me, but I can't see anyone." Some residents, I've learned, observe more than participate, watching the care provided to others while requiring little intervention themselves. They exist in the spaces between official admission and documented discharge, serving as witnesses to the daily operations of facilities designed to provide comfort during life's final stages. J. Morrison may have been one of these observer residents, maintaining vigilant attention to the quality of care provided at Hillcrest Manor, ensuring through his silent presence that staff members remain dedicated to their professional responsibilities. His departure may indicate satisfaction with what he witnessed, confidence that the facility would continue providing appropriate care long after his invisible supervision was no longer needed. Fire safety protocols in nursing homes require absolute precision. Residents with limited mobility need immediate assistance during emergency evacuations, and staff training must be comprehensive enough to ensure everyone reaches safety quickly. At Sunset Vista Care Center, we conducted monthly fire drills to maintain readiness, but actual emergency evacuations were rare enough that most staff had never experienced a real fire alarm during patient care hours, which is why the 2 a.m. fire alarm on Wednesday night created such intense activity throughout our facility. The alarm system activated with full emergency protocols, piercing sirens, flashing lights, and automated voice announcements directing staff to implement immediate evacuation procedures. Emergency lighting illuminated exit routes, fire doors sealed automatically, and the building's sprinkler system began discharging water in areas where smoke detectors indicated potential fire hazards. I was conducting routine medication rounds when the alarms began. Training took over immediately. Secure medications, grab resident lists, begin systematic evacuation starting with residents who required the most assistance. Fire alarm activated, I announced over the intercom system. All staff implement emergency evacuation procedures. This is not a drill. The night shift responded with practiced efficiency. Nurses began moving residents from their rooms toward designated exit points. Orderlies assisted patients who required wheelchairs or stretchers. The charge nurse coordinated activities from the central command station while maintaining communication with emergency services. Room by room, we evacuated residents according to established protocols. Mrs. Henderson from room 201, requiring wheelchair assistance. Mr. Chen from room 203, ambulatory but needing guidance. Mrs. Garcia from room 205, bedridden and requiring stretcher transport. The evacuation process took 27 minutes, consistent with our drill timing and regulatory requirements. All 63 residents were moved to the designated assembly area in the parking lot, where we conducted accountability checks to ensure no one remained in the building. But when I looked back at Sunset Vista, the building appeared completely normal. No flames, no smoke, no emergency vehicles responding to our fire alarm. The exterior of the facility showed no signs of fire damage or emergency conditions that would justify the massive evacuation we had just completed. "Where are the fire trucks?" asked Janet, our night charge nurse. The parking lot remained empty except for evacuated residents and staff members. No emergency responders, no fire department vehicles, no indication that outside agencies had received our alarm signal. I used my cell phone to call 911 directly. "This is Sunset Vista Care Center. We activated our fire alarm system 20 minutes ago. Are fire trucks en route?" The emergency dispatcher checked their system. "We have no record of any alarm from Sunset Vista. No emergency calls logged from your facility tonight. But our fire alarm had definitely activated. 63 residents were sitting in wheelchairs and on stretchers in the parking lot as proof of the emergency evacuation. Let me verify the alarm status," I told Janet, walking back toward the building. The facility appeared completely normal. No alarms sounding, no emergency lighting, no sprinkler discharge. The building was quiet, dark except for normal night lighting, and showed no evidence of the fire emergency that had triggered our evacuation. I entered through the main entrance, expecting to hear residual alarm signals or see signs of sprinkler activation, but the interior was dry, quiet, and undisturbed. No water damage, no alarm panels showing emergency status, no indication that the fire safety system had ever activated. "This is impossible," I muttered, checking the fire alarm control panel. The system showed normal status, no alarms active, no record of recent emergency activation. But I had vivid memories of piercing sirens, flashing lights, and sprinkler discharge that had motivated our complete facility evacuation. The charge nurse radioed from the parking lot. "How does the building look?" "Normal. No signs of fire, no alarm activity. It's like nothing happened." We began the process of returning residents to their rooms, puzzled by the evacuation that seemed to have no cause. Each resident was wheeled or guided back to their assigned rooms, where they settled back into bed as if the emergency evacuation had been a strange interruption to their normal sleep patterns. "Was that a drill?" asked Mrs. Henderson as I helped her back into bed. "I don't think so. The alarms seemed real. But by 3 a.m. all residents were back in their rooms, and Sunset Vista had returned to its normal nighttime quiet. I filed an incident report about the mysterious fire alarm, noting the complete evacuation and the absence of any identifiable emergency condition. The report was classified as false alarm, cause unknown. The next night, at exactly 2 a.m., the fire alarm activated. Again, same piercing sirens, same flashing lights, same automated voice directing immediate evacuation procedures. The night staff responded with identical efficiency, implementing the same evacuation protocols that had worked perfectly the previous evening. But this time, when we conducted our accountability check in the parking lot, we discovered that Mr. Guy, Walter Thompson from room 318, was missing. "Where's Mr. Thompson?" Janet asked, reviewing her resident list. I checked my evacuation assignments. Room 318 was supposed to be evacuated by Maria. "Did you move Mr. Thompson?" Maria looked confused. "Room 318 was empty when I checked. No resident, bed was made, room was vacant." But according to our resident roster, Walter Thompson should have been sleeping in room 318, requiring assistance during emergency evacuation due to his limited mobility. We searched the parking lot thoroughly, thinking Mr. Thompson might have been placed with a different group of evacuated residents. But he was nowhere among the people we had moved to safety. He must still be in the building, I concluded, preparing to re-enter the facility. But when I checked room 318, it was empty, and had clearly been vacant for some time. The bed was made with fresh linens, personal belongings were absent, and there was no indication that anyone had been living in the room recently. I consulted the night admission records. Walter Thompson was listed as a current resident, admitted 6 months earlier for long-term care following a stroke. But his room showed no evidence of occupancy. "Maybe he was transferred to another room," suggested Janet. We searched the entire facility, checking every room, every common area, every space where a resident might be located. No Walter Thompson, no indication of where he might have gone during the evacuation. But our records clearly showed him as a current resident who should have been present during the fire alarm. The fire department finally arrived 30 minutes after the second alarm, responding to a delayed notification that had somehow reached their dispatch system. But when they inspected the building, they found no evidence of fire, no activated sprinkler systems, and no emergency conditions. "Your alarm system doesn't show any activation," the fire chief reported. "No smoke detection, no heat sensors triggered, no reason for emergency evacuation." But we had evacuated 62 residents, minus the missing Mr. Thompson, in response to alarms that seemed completely real to everyone present. The fire department's investigation revealed that Sunset Vista's alarm system had not activated on either night. No electronic record of emergency signals, no documentation of sprinkler discharge, no evidence that the fire safety systems had ever operated. But multiple staff members had clear memories of responding to emergency alarms and conducting complete facility evacuations. "Mass hallucination," suggested the fire chief. "Sometimes stress can cause groups of people to experience shared perceptions that aren't based on actual events. But hallucinations don't result in 63 residents being moved to parking lots in the middle of the night." I researched Walter Thompson's status more thoroughly, trying to understand how he could be missing from an evacuation when he might not have existed as a current resident. The administrative records were confusing and contradictory. His admission paperwork indicated arrival 6 months earlier, but the financial records showed no payment history. His medical chart contained routine care documentation, but no physician had written orders for his treatment. Walter Thompson existed in our resident roster, but had left no trace of actual presence at Sunset Vista Care Center. A week later, I found a handwritten note on my desk. "Thank you for the evacuation drills. They help ensure everyone stays safe. W.T." The handwriting was neat and careful, written by someone with obvious gratitude for staff efforts to maintain emergency preparedness. Some residents, I've learned, participate in fire safety protocols even when they exist outside normal admission and discharge procedures. They appreciate efforts to protect vulnerable people and contribute to emergency preparedness by ensuring that evacuation drills occur regularly. The fire alarms that weren't alarms may represent Walter Thompson's way of testing our emergency response capabilities ensuring that Sunset Vista's staff remained ready to protect residents during actual fire emergencies. And perhaps that kind of safety oversight is valuable, even when it comes from residents who exist primarily to verify that those who are physically present receive the protection they deserve during the most dangerous moments of institutional care. Common areas in nursing homes serve as gathering spaces where residents can socialize, watch television, and participate in activities that break the routine of room-based care. The day room at Willowbrook Manor contained comfortable seating arranged around a large screen television that played programming throughout the day and late into the evening for residents who had difficulty sleeping. The room was rarely empty during waking hours, but overnight it usually remained vacant except for the soft glow of the television that stayed on to provide ambient light and background sound for residents who might wander into common areas during nighttime confusion episodes. Which is why the shadow that appeared in the security footage was so puzzling. I first noticed it during my weekly review of overnight surveillance recordings. The dayroom cameras showed normal activity until approximately 11 p.m., when the last residents returned to their rooms for sleep. But at 11:23 p.m., a dark shape appeared in one of the recliners positioned in front of the television. Not a person, a shadow, human-shaped but lacking the detail and dimension that would indicate an actual resident. The form appeared solid, enough to create a distinct silhouette, but translucent enough that furniture behind it remained partially visible. The shadow sat motionless for hours, facing the television as if watching late-night programming. No movement, no shifting position, no indication of life except for the clear outline of someone seated in the chair. At 5:47 a.m., as early morning light began to filter through the dayroom windows, the shadow faded gradually until it disappeared completely. I assumed the image was a camera malfunction or lighting artifact that created the illusion of a seated figure. Overnight security systems often produce false images due to changes in ambient lighting or electronic interference. But when I checked the dayroom personally during the following night's rounds, I found something that suggested the shadow might represent actual presence. The recliner where the shadow had appeared showed a clear body impression. The cushions were compressed in the pattern of someone who had been sitting for extended periods, with additional indentations that indicated leg positioning and arm placement. But no resident had been in the dayroom since evening activities ended at 9 p.m. I examined the chair more carefully. The fabric showed wear patterns consistent with regular use, but the impressions were fresh, as if someone had just vacated the seat moments before my arrival. "Has anyone been using the dayroom tonight?" I asked Tom, the night security guard. He checked his log. No activity since the last residents went to bed around 10:30. Why? Someone's been sitting in the blue recliner. The cushions show recent use. Tom accompanied me to inspect the chair. That's odd. I walked through the dayroom an hour ago and it was empty, but the body impressions remained distinct, suggesting weight and pressure that couldn't be explained by natural cushion compression. Over the following weeks, I monitored the dayroom more systematically, checking both the security footage and the physical condition of the furniture. The pattern was consistent. The shadow appeared in the surveillance recordings, and the recliner showed corresponding signs of occupancy. But no staff member ever observed an actual person in the dayroom during overnight hours. I began reviewing the security footage more carefully, studying the shadow's behavior and appearance. The figure maintained the posture of someone watching television attentively, occasionally shifting slightly as if adjusting for comfort, but never rising from the chair or displaying obvious signs of restlessness. Most intriguingly, the shadow would occasionally turn its head toward the security camera, as if aware of being observed. The movement was subtle but deliberate, suggesting consciousness and responsiveness to the surveillance environment. "That's definitely unusual," agreed Janet, our night supervisor, when I showed her the footage. "It looks like someone is sitting there, but we've never seen anyone in the dayroom during those hours. What do you think it could be?" Janet studied the shadow's posture and positioning. "It looks like Mr. Patterson. He used to sit in that exact chair every night, same position, always watching the late movie." Mr. Patterson had been a resident at Willowbrook for 3 years before passing away 2 months earlier. He had been known for his evening television routine, settling into the blue recliner after dinner and watching programming until nearly midnight. Mr. Patterson always sat exactly like that, Janet continued. Same chair, same posture, same habit of looking around the room during commercial breaks. The shadow's behavior matched Mr. Patterson's remembered patterns precisely. Head movements during apparent commercial breaks, slight adjustments that mirrored his arthritis-related positioning needs, and the overall stillness of someone enjoying familiar evening entertainment. I researched Mr. Patterson's television preferences and compared them to the programming schedule during the shadow's appearances. The figure consistently manifested during the time slots when Mr. Patterson's favorite shows would have been broadcast. Classic movies, old television series, and news programs that had comprised his nightly viewing routine. Should we be concerned about this? Asked Dr. Williams, our medical director, when I reported the phenomenon. The shadow doesn't seem to be causing any problems. It just sits there watching television. But residents might be disturbed if they encounter whatever this is. But no residents reported unusual experiences in the day room. The shadow appeared only during hours when the room was otherwise empty, maintaining Mr. Patterson's television schedule without interfering with active facility operations. I decided to test whether the shadow was responsive to changes in its environment. One evening I adjusted the television channel during the shadow's usual viewing time, switching from the classic movie channel to a news program. The next morning's security footage showed the shadow had turned its head toward the television, more frequently, displaying the restless behavior that Mr. Patterson had exhibited when his preferred programming was interrupted. When I returned the television to the classic movie channel, the shadow resumed its previous stillness and attentive viewing posture. The entity appeared to have definite programming preferences that matched Mr. Patterson's remembered viewing habits. I began leaving the television tuned to channels that Mr. Patterson had enjoyed, ensuring that his favorite programs were available during the shadow's evening appearances. The gesture seemed to be appreciated. The shadow's posture became more relaxed, and the head movements toward the security camera appeared less frequent. Other staff members began acknowledging the shadow's presence during their rounds. Good evening, Mr. Patterson, they would whisper when entering the day room, and the security footage would show the shadow's head turning slightly in response to the greeting. The recognition seemed to be welcomed. The shadow's positioning became more settled, and the wear patterns on the recliner indicated someone who felt comfortable and at home in familiar surroundings. Administration eventually accepted the shadow as a benign presence that posed no threat to residents or staff operations. If Mr. Patterson wants to continue enjoying his evening television routine, I suppose that's harmless enough, the administrator concluded. But I was curious about whether the shadow was visible to residents who might have special sensitivity to such phenomena. Mrs. Chen, one of our residents with moderate dementia, occasionally mentioned seeing the nice man who watches TV late at night. Does he bother you, Mrs. Chen? Oh no, dear. He's very quiet. Sometimes I sit with him for a few minutes before bed. The security footage confirmed Mrs. Chen's account. On nights when she experienced insomnia, she would enter the day room and sit in a chair near the shadow, apparently sharing the evening television experience with Mr. Patterson's continuing presence. The shadow would turn its head toward Mrs. Chen during these visits, as if acknowledging her company and welcoming the social interaction that had been an important part of Mr. Patterson's evening routine. Some residents, I've learned, never really leave the common areas where they found comfort during their time at care facilities. They continue their daily routines, maintaining the activities that provided structure and enjoyment during their final years. Mr. Patterson's shadow represents the persistence of simple pleasures that made institutional life bearable, familiar television programs, comfortable seating, and the security of routine that helped him feel at home in a place designed for end-of-life care. The day room continues to serve its intended purpose, providing entertainment and social interaction for residents who need the comfort of shared activities. And sometimes that includes former residents who appreciate having their favorite programming available during the quiet hours when companionship matters most. Some evening routines, I've realized, become permanent features of the places where they provided comfort, reminding us that the most important activities are often the simple ones that help people feel at home, regardless of their current state of existence. End-of-shift accountability requires absolute precision in nursing home operations. Every resident must be located and their status verified before the departing shift can transfer responsibility to incoming staff. During my 19 years as night supervisor at Peaceful Acres Care Facility, I had conducted thousands of shift change procedures, ensuring that no resident was overlooked during the transition between care teams. The process followed established protocol. Walk through each room, verify each resident's presence and condition, record their status on the accountability roster, and provide detailed report to the incoming supervisor about any concerns or changes that required attention. But my accountability rosters began including a name that shouldn't have been there. The extra entry always appeared at the bottom of my handwritten list added after I had completed the official resident count. Margaret Fletcher, room 127, stable, resting comfortably. Margaret Fletcher had died at Peaceful Acres 10 years before I began working there. I first noticed the additional name during my Thursday morning shift completion. My handwriting was unmistakable. The same script I used for all documentation, written with the same pen I carried for medication records and progress notes, but I had no memory of adding Margaret Fletcher to my accountability list. Room 127 had been vacant for 2 weeks, awaiting a new admission after the previous resident's discharge. I had verified its empty status multiple times during my overnight rounds, noting the made bed and prepared room in my standard documentation. Yet my accountability roster showed Margaret Fletcher as present and stable in room 127. I consulted the resident census to verify current occupancy. 47 active residents, none named Margaret Fletcher, no one assigned to room 127. But my handwritten list showed 48 residents, including the impossible addition at the bottom of the page. Did you add this name? I asked myself aloud, studying the handwriting that was definitely mine, despite my complete lack of memory about writing it. I checked historical records for any Margaret Fletcher who might have been associated with Peaceful Acres. The archives contained documentation of Margaret Fletcher's residence from 2008 to 2014, when she died peacefully in room 127 at age 89. The same room that my accountability list showed as her current location. The next night, I paid special attention to my documentation process, carefully monitoring each entry I made on the accountability roster. Room by room, resident by resident, I recorded the status of all current patients according to standard protocol. But when I reviewed my completed list at the end of the shift, Margaret Fletcher's name appeared again. Margaret Fletcher, room 127, comfortable night, no concerns. Written in my handwriting, using my pen, but added without my conscious knowledge or memory, I decided to conduct an experiment. Instead of using my normal accountability roster, I switched to a different form and completed the resident count, using a borrowed pen. The result was identical. Margaret Fletcher's name appeared at the bottom of the list, written in my handwriting with the borrowed pen, documenting care provided to a resident who had died a decade earlier. Dr. Peterson, our medical director, was puzzled when I showed him the impossible documentation. This is definitely your handwriting, but you're saying you didn't write it? I have no memory of adding her name, but it's definitely my script. Margaret Fletcher. That name sounds familiar. Dr. Peterson researched her medical records. She was a long-term resident, very popular with staff. Died in 2014 from natural causes. Room 127, just like your list shows. Why would I be documenting her as a current resident? I don't know. But the notes about her condition are medically appropriate. Stable? Comfortable. No concerns. Exactly. What you'd expect for someone in long-term care who was doing well. The phenomenon continued every night. Margaret Fletcher's name would appear on my accountability roster, always with brief notes indicating stable condition and appropriate care. The handwriting was consistently mine, but the act of writing remained outside my conscious awareness. I began checking room 127 specifically during my rounds, looking for any indication that might explain why my documentation insisted Margaret Fletcher was present. The room remained empty according to visual observation, but I started noticing subtle signs that suggested occupancy. The bed linens showed slight impressions, as if someone had been resting there recently. The water glass on the bedside table appeared to have been used, despite being filled fresh each day by housekeeping. The curtains were positioned differently than I remembered, adjusted to filter morning light in a way that suggested personal preference. "Is someone staying in room 127? I asked the day shift supervisor. She checked her records. "No, it's been vacant since Mr. Williams was discharged 2 weeks ago." But the signs of occupancy persisted, and Margaret Fletcher continued to appear on my nightly accountability rosters. I decided to test whether Margaret Fletcher was responsive to changes in room 127's environment. One evening, I left a magazine on the bedside table, a gardening publication that matched the interests listed in her historical care plan. The next morning, the magazine was opened to an article about rose cultivation, positioned as if someone had been reading it carefully. The accountability roster for that night included additional detail. Margaret Fletcher, room 127, enjoyed reading material, thanked staff for thoughtful attention. But I had no memory of interacting with Margaret Fletcher or receiving thanks for providing the magazine. I began treating room 127 as if it were occupied, maintaining the kind of personal attention that long-term care residents require. Fresh flowers, adjustment of room temperature, occasional conversation directed toward the apparently empty space. My accountability rosters began reflecting these interactions. Margaret Fletcher, room 127. Appreciated fresh flowers, room temperature, comfortable, responded well to social interaction. All documented in my handwriting, describing care I had no conscious memory of providing. Other staff members began reporting similar experiences when they worked overtime shifts or covered my duties during vacation time. Margaret Fletcher's name would appear on their accountability lists, written in their own handwriting, documenting care they couldn't remember providing. "It's like she's still a resident," explained Susan, one of our senior nurses. I found myself documenting her care as if she were actually present in room 127. "Do you remember writing her name?" "Not exactly, but the documentation seems right. She was always a stable patient who required minimal intervention." Administration investigated the phenomenon as a potential documentation error, but they found that the Margaret Fletcher entries were medically appropriate and professionally written. The notes reflected excellent patient care and attention to individual needs. "The documentation quality is exemplary," the quality assurance supervisor reported. "Whoever is providing care to Margaret Fletcher is doing excellent work." But Margaret Fletcher existed only in our handwritten accountability rosters and in the memories of staff members who had cared for her during her actual residence at Peaceful Acres. I've come to accept that some residents remain on our accountability lists long after their official discharge or death, continuing to receive attention and care from staff members who remember their needs and appreciate their presence during difficult times. Margaret Fletcher's persistent appearance in our documentation represents the continuation of professional relationships that transcend normal boundaries between life and death, ensuring that former residents receive ongoing acknowledgement of their importance to the people who provided their care. The accountability roster serves its intended purpose, ensuring that no one is forgotten or overlooked during shift changes, and sometimes that includes residents whose needs continue even after they've moved beyond the requirement for physical care. Some roll calls, I've learned, extend beyond official censuses to include the people who remain important to us, regardless of their current status. And some of the most accurate documentation reflects care provided to residents who exist in our professional memory and personal dedication, generating accountability records that prove we never really stopped caring for the people who trusted us with their final years. Margaret Fletcher's name continues to appear on my nightly rosters, written in my handwriting by a part of my professional consciousness that refuses to let former residents slip away without continued acknowledgement of their value and their permanent place in our institutional family.